Hi, welcome to the Aftermath Tales. Ready for a new story? Very well, let's begin.
How many times can you watch your mother break before you stop trying to fix her? The fluorescent lights above Avery's cubicle flickered as she reached for her headset, already dreading the next 8 hours of, "Have you tried turning it off and on again?" But before she could log into the system, her personal phone buzzed against her thigh. Mom. Avery's stomach dropped. Her mother never called during work hours unless something was wrong. "Hello?" Avery whispered, cupping her hand around the phone. The sound that came through made her chest tighten, that familiar broken sob that meant only one thing. "He'd done it again? Avery, honey?" Her mother's voice cracked. "Your father, he lost his job yesterday. He came home last night and..." Another sob. "He threw a beer bottle at the TV, shattered the whole thing. Glass everywhere." Avery closed her eyes and pressed her forehead against her palm. Of course he did, because that's what Carter Rowan does when life doesn't go his way. He destroys things. Usually their things. Things Mom had to work overtime to replace. "Mom, are you hurt?" Avery asked. No, I'm fine. I don't know what to do anymore." 24 years old, and Avery was still fielding these calls, still being the adult in conversations with her actual adult mother. The fluorescent light above her gave another aggressive flicker, as if the universe was highlighting just how stuck they all were. Avery Rowan had been having this exact conversation with her mother for as long as she could remember. Different details, same story. Dad loses job, Dad gets drunk, Dad breaks something, Mom calls Avery crying, rinse, repeat, forever. She was 24, single, and worked at Pinnacle Solutions, a call center that sounded way more important than it actually was. She troubleshot internet problems for people who thought Wi-Fi was magic and routers were mysterious black boxes. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid her rent and kept her exactly where she wanted to be, 43 miles away from the chaos that was her parents' marriage. Avery had thought moving out would have freed her from their dysfunction. She'd been wrong. "Avery, you don't understand," her mother continued, and Avery could picture her standing in their kitchen, probably staring at the empty space where their TV used to be. "He's struggling. This job meant something to him. Every job means something to him until he decides it doesn't," Avery said, lowering her voice as her supervisor walked past. "Mom, this is the 4th job in 2 years. 4th. At what point do we stop pretending this is about the jobs?" Jane went quiet, which meant she was either considering Avery's words or preparing her usual arsenal of excuses. Avery would bet money on the excuses. He just hasn't found his tribe yet. There it was. His tribe. As if Dad was some misunderstood warrior searching for his people instead of a 46-year-old man who couldn't hold down a job because he thought everyone else was the problem. Avery had been hearing about this mythical tribe since she was 12, the age when everything changed. That was when Dad hit Mom for the first time. Not hard, he'd said afterward, as if the force mattered more than the act itself. Just a slap when she'd asked him to help with the dishes after he'd been laid off from the hardware store. Mom packed them up that same night. They stayed with her sister for 2 months, and for the first time in Avery's life, she slept without wondering what would be broken when she woke up. No raised voices, no slamming doors, no walking on eggshells around a man whose mood could shift like weather. But Mom went back. She always went back. "He needs support right now," Jane said, using that same gentle tone she'd used to explain why they were moving back home when Avery was 12. "I can't abandon him when he's down." The thing about being the child of an enabler, Avery had learned, was that you recognize the signs early. The way her mother would work extra shifts to cover Carter's unemployment. The way she'd make excuses to friends about why they couldn't afford family outings. The way she'd age 10 years in the span of 2 stress-carving lines around her eyes while Dad lounged on the couch, beer in hand, complaining about how unfair the world was. Mom was only 47, but she looked older. The stress of carrying a grown man had bent her shoulders and dulled her smile. Meanwhile, Dad had found his routine. Lose job, drink, destroy, repeat. And somehow, in his mind, he was the victim in all of this. "Mom," Avery said, watching her coworkers settle into their cubicles around her, starting their normal day with their normal problems. Come stay with me, just for a while. Let him figure out how to take care of himself. I can't do that to him. What about what he's doing to you? Silence, always silence when Avery asked the real questions. The truth was, Avery used to write everything down, starting when she was 12, right after they moved back home. She had this purple diary with a tiny lock that she kept hidden under her mattress. Every fight, every broken dish, every time Mom made excuses, she wrote it all down. Not because she thought anyone would read it, but because she needed proof that she wasn't crazy, that this wasn't normal, that other families didn't live like this. Avery still had that diary. Sometimes she read it when Mom called with updates about Dad's latest struggle, just to remind herself why she moved out, why she wouldn't let herself get pulled back into their cycle. But here she was on the phone at 8:47 a.m., being pulled right back in. I have to go, Avery told her mother, watching her supervisor tap his watch meaningfully. We'll talk about this later. Avery, wait. She hung up, not because she didn't care, but because she'd learned that these conversations could stretch for hours if she let them. Mom would cycle through every excuse, every reason why this time was different, why Dad deserved another chance. Avery had heard them all before. The morning crawled by in a blur of password resets and router troubleshooting, but every call reminded her of the conversation she'd just had. Mrs. Henderson couldn't figure out why her internet kept cutting out, just like Mom couldn't figure out why her marriage kept falling apart. Mr. Garcia was frustrated that his new modem wasn't working the way his old one did, just like Avery was frustrated that her family couldn't function like other families did. By lunch, she'd made a decision. Avery drove to her mother's house, their house, after work. It was a small ranch-style home in a neighborhood that had seen better days. The grass needed cutting, and Dad's truck sat in the driveway with one tire looking suspiciously flat. Probably couldn't afford to fix it. Mom answered the door looking exactly like Avery had expected, tired, worried, older than her years. She was still in her work clothes from the real estate office, but her blazer was wrinkled and her usually perfect hair was falling out of its clip. Avery, what are you doing here? We need to talk, really talk. Avery stepped inside before she could object. The living room looked strange without the TV, just an empty entertainment center and a coffee table covered in glass shards her mother had apparently given up trying to clean. Where is he? Upstairs, sleeping. Jane lowered her voice automatically. He was up late looking for jobs online. Avery almost laughed. Looking for jobs online. Right. More likely he was up late feeling sorry for himself and planning his next tantrum. Mom, sit down. She cleared some space on the couch, pushing aside a throw pillow that had seen better days. I'm going to say something, and I need you to really hear me, okay? Jane perched on the edge of the couch like she was ready to run. After 24 years of living with Dad's explosions, Avery guessed that instinct never really went away. This isn't love, Avery said. What you're doing, covering for him, making excuses, working yourself to death while he destroys everything. This isn't love, it's fear. Her mother's eyes filled with tears immediately. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I lived here too, remember? I watched you work 2 jobs when I was in high school because Dad couldn't keep one. I watched you explain away that bruise on your arm like it was your fault for startling him. I watched you shrink yourself smaller and smaller, trying not to set him off. He's gotten better. Mom. Avery reached for her hands, and they were shaking. The TV is destroyed. Again. How is that better? Jane pulled away and stood up, wrapping her arms around herself. It was her defensive posture, the one Avery remembered from childhood. He's going through a rough patch. The economy is hard right now, and he's not as young as he used to be. Employers discriminate against older workers. He's 46, not 70, and the economy doesn't make people throw beer bottles at televisions. From upstairs came the sound of footsteps and a toilet flushing. Mom's whole body tensed. You should go, she whispered. He gets upset when he knows we've been talking about him. And there it was. The truth she'd never admit out loud. She was afraid of her own husband, afraid of his moods, his reactions, his anger. This wasn't a marriage. It was hostage situation with shared finances. Heavy footsteps on the stairs. Dad appeared in the doorway, wearing the same clothes he'd probably slept in. His hair was sticking up on one side, and he had that puffy, hungover look that Avery remembered from childhood mornings. "Avery." His voice was flat. "Didn't know you were coming by." "Just checking on Mom," Avery said, standing up. She was taller than him now, something that still surprised her. When you're a kid, your parents seem like giants. Now he just looked like what he was, a middle-aged man who'd given up on himself. "Your mother's fine. We're handling our business just fine without input from the peanut gallery." There it was, the subtle hostility, the way he'd make everything sound like it was everyone else's fault. Avery felt that familiar anger rising in her chest, the same feeling she'd had at 12 when she realized other dads didn't talk to their families like this. "Are you?" she asked. "Handling it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like Mom's handling everything while you handle the beer." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Mom made a small sound, something between a gasp and a whimper. "Avery," she said quietly, "please." But Avery was done. Done with the tiptoeing, done with the excuses, done with watching her mother disappear piece by piece. "I'm offering you a way out," she said to her mother, ignoring Dad completely. "My couch pulls out into a bed. You can stay with me while you figure out what you actually want your life to look like. No judgment, no pressure, just space to breathe." Dad stepped forward and Avery saw Mom flinch slightly. "She's not going anywhere. This is her home." "This is a prison?" Avery said. "And she's the only one who can unlock the door." The silence stretched between them, thick with years of unspoken truths. Finally, Dad turned and walked back upstairs without another word. The sound of a door slamming echoed through the house. Mom was crying again, but quietly now, the kind of tears that come from exhaustion rather than shock. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't leave him like this. He needs me." Avery wanted to scream. Instead, she kissed her mother's forehead and headed for the door. "When you're ready," she said, "you have my number." 2 months later, Avery was standing in her kitchen on a Saturday morning, watching coffee drip into the pot and actually feeling peaceful. The sun was streaming through her clean windows. She had nowhere to be, and for once her phone wasn't buzzing with family drama. Of course, that's exactly when it rang. Mom's contact photo smiled up at her from the screen, a picture Avery had taken of her last Christmas, back when she still believed things might change. She didn't have to guess what this call was about. There was only ever one reason Mom called anymore. "Let me guess," Avery said instead of hello. "He broke something else." Her mother's sigh told her everything. "The living room window. He threw his beer bottle?" Avery finished. "Empty beer bottle? That seems to be his weapon of choice these days." "Avery, please don't be sarcastic. He was frustrated because I haven't bought a new TV yet, and he was bored and—" "Stop!" Avery set her coffee mug down harder than necessary. "Just stop with the excuses. He's a grown man, Mom. Grown men don't throw tantrums because they're bored. Toddlers do that." "You don't understand what he's going through." "What he's going through?" Avery felt things snap inside her. 2 months of restrained frustration finally breaking free. "What about what you're going through? You're working 50-hour weeks at the real estate office, coming home to a man-child who destroys your house when he doesn't get his way, and you're making excuses for him." Silence on the other end. But not the defeated silence Avery was used to. This felt different, heavier. "Maybe," she continued, her voice getting louder, "he needs an intervention, again. Because clearly the last one didn't stick. Or maybe, and hear me out, maybe you need to stop enabling him." "I'm not enabling." "You are." The words came out sharper than Avery intended, but she couldn't stop them. "You've been enabling him for so long that he thinks this is normal. He thinks it's acceptable to destroy things when he's upset because you always clean up the mess. You always make the excuses. You always fix what he breaks." Avery started pacing her small kitchen, coffee forgotten. "Mom, if I marry someone like Dad someday, what am I supposed to do? Copy you? Enable him and make excuses while he destroys our life piece by piece? Is that the example you want to set?" The silence stretched so long Avery thought her mother had hung up. "Mom?" "I'm here," Jane whispered. "I'm tired," Avery said, and suddenly she was. Bone deep, exhausted, tired. "I'm tired of these calls, different things broken, same excuses. I'm tired of watching you disappear. I'm tired of pretending this is normal." She walked to her living room window and looked out at the street. Normal families were starting their Saturday mornings, kids on bikes, neighbors walking dogs, couples heading out for breakfast together. Simple, undramatic life. "I have something to tell you," Avery said. "I accepted that position in Texas. Austin. I'm moving out there in 3 weeks. They need me to start the new department as soon as possible. It's a promotion. Team supervisor. Employee housing." More silence. "It's a good opportunity, Mom. A chance to start over somewhere new, build something different." She took a breath. "I want you to come with me." "Avery, just listen. You could transfer to a real estate office in Austin. Start fresh. No more broken windows, no more walking on eggshells, no more working yourself to death to support a man who contributes nothing but chaos." "I can't just leave." "Why not?" Avery demanded. "Give me one good reason why you can't leave a man who treats you like a servant and your home like a target range." The silence this time was different. Avery could hear her mother thinking, maybe actually considering it for the first time. "He needs me," Jane finally said, but her voice was smaller than usual. "No, he doesn't. He needs a therapist, a job counselor, and probably rehab. He doesn't need a woman to clean up after his tantrums." "That's not love, Mom." "That's just convenient for him." Avery heard her mother take a shaky breath. I need to think about this." "Think about what? Whether you deserve to be happy? Whether you're worth more than being someone's emotional punching bag? Because I can answer both of those questions right now." "I can't have this conversation right now," Jane said. I need to call you back." She hung up before Avery could respond. Avery stood there holding her phone, staring at the ended call screen. For the first time in one of their conversations, she felt like she'd actually said what needed to be said. No tiptoeing around Dad's feelings, no gentle suggestions that went nowhere. Just the truth, harsh and necessary. Outside her window, a couple walked by holding hands, laughing about something. They looked happy, uncomplicated. Avery wondered if Mom even remembered what that felt like anymore. Jane hung up the phone and stared at it in her hand, her daughter's words echoing in her mind like a broken record. "If I marry someone like Dad someday, what am I supposed to do? Copy you?" The house was quiet around her, that terrible walking on eggshells quiet that she'd grown so used to she barely noticed it anymore. Carter was upstairs, probably passed out after his latest tantrum. The living room window was still broken, cardboard and duct tape covering the hole where glass used to be. Just like always, she'd cleaned up the beer bottle fragments, swept up the glass, tried to make everything look normal again. But Avery's question wouldn't leave her alone. Jane walked to the kitchen and made herself a cup of tea with shaking hands. When had she started shaking all the time? When had she become this nervous, jumpy woman who flinched at loud noises and apologized for things that weren't her fault? Copy you, the words stung because they were true. If Avery ended up with someone like her father and God, the thought made Jane's stomach turn. What example had she set for her daughter? That women clean up men's messes? That love means absorbing someone else's anger? That marriage is about surviving instead of thriving? She sat at the kitchen table, the same one where she'd paid bills while Carter slept off hangovers, where she'd eaten dinner alone while he watched TV, where she'd hidden credit card statements so he wouldn't see how much his unemployment was costing them. How many hours had she spent at this table, managing their life while he destroyed it? 24 years. That's how long she'd been making excuses for him. 24 years of, he's having a hard time, and he just needs support, and he'll find his way. 24 years of watching her daughter learn that this was normal, but it wasn't normal. Other husbands didn't throw beer bottles when they were bored. Other wives didn't work overtime to replace furniture their spouses destroyed. Other families didn't live in constant tension waiting for the next explosion. Jane thought about Avery's announcement. A new job, 3 weeks, a fresh start, a chance to remember who she was before she became Carter's caretaker and emotional punching bag. He needs me, she'd told Avery. But did he? Or did he just need someone, anyone, to clean up after him and pay the bills? Would he even notice if she was gone, as long as someone was there to sweep up the glass? The truth hit her like a physical blow. She wasn't his wife anymore. She was his employee. An unpaid employee who worked around the clock to maintain his comfort while he contributed nothing but chaos. From upstairs came the sound of snoring, deep, peaceful snoring. He was sleeping soundly while she sat here, 47 years old, wondering if this was all her life would ever be. If I marry someone like Dad, what am I supposed to do? Copy you? No. She wouldn't let that happen. She wouldn't let her daughter think this was what she deserved. Jane looked around the kitchen, really looked at it. The chipped counters she'd been meaning to replace for 5 years but couldn't afford because Carter kept losing jobs. The refrigerator covered in past due notices she'd been juggling. The cabinet door that hung crooked because he'd slammed it too hard during one of his rages. This wasn't a home. It was a prison she'd helped build, bar by bar, excuse by excuse. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number she'd saved months ago but never called. Margaret Walsh, divorce attorney. A woman from her real estate office had recommended her after her own messy divorce. Jane's finger hovered over the call button. It was Saturday evening, but Margaret had said to call any time, day or night, if she ever needed to talk. She pressed call before she could lose her nerve. Margaret Walsh. Margaret, this is Jane Rowan. Linda Martinez referred me. I think I need help. Jane, of course. Linda mentioned you might call. Are you safe to talk right now? Safe to talk. When was the last time Jane had felt safe in her own home? Yes, he's asleep. Margaret, I need to know about divorce, what it would look like, how quickly it could happen. And I need to know about leaving, like really leaving, moving out of state. Okay, let's talk. How long have you been married? 24 years. The number felt heavier when Jane said it out loud. Any children? One daughter, but she's grown. She lives on her own. She lives 43 miles away because she couldn't stand to be around them anymore, Jane thought. And you mentioned wanting to leave the state? My daughter accepted a job out of state. She wants me to come with her. The words came out in a rush. I know it sounds crazy, but I think I want to go. It doesn't sound crazy at all, Jane. It sounds like you're ready to start your life over. Let me ask you this. Do you feel safe confronting your husband about divorce? Jane almost laughed. Safe? No. He has a temper. He's never hit me again after the first time, but he destroys things when he's angry. Our TV, windows, dishes. I'm always cleaning up after his tantrums. Again, Jane, has he hit you before? Once. Years ago. I left him for a while, but I went back. The shame of it burned in Jane's throat. I'm glad you left, even temporarily. That shows strength. Listen, here's what we can do. For the next hour, Margaret walked Jane through everything. The paperwork, the timeline, the process servers. She could have everything ready by Monday, Margaret said. Divorce papers that could be served the same day Jane left town. You don't have to face him, Jane. You don't owe him a confrontation or an explanation. You owe him nothing except legal notice that the marriage is over. After Jane hung up, she sat in the quiet kitchen for a long time. Then she went to their bedroom so carefully, so quietly, and pulled out the suitcase from the back of the closet. She packed slowly, taking only what mattered, her clothes, her jewelry, the photo albums Carter never looked at anyway, the few things that were truly hers. In the bottom of her jewelry box, she found something she'd forgotten about, a business card for a real estate office she'd picked up at a conference last year. The manager had told her to call if she ever wanted to relocate. It was a sign. Or maybe she was just finally ready to see the signs that had been there all along. By Sunday evening, everything was arranged. Margaret would file the papers Monday morning and have them served Monday afternoon. Jane had called in sick to work, something she never did, and used the time to transfer her real estate license, contact the out-of-state office, and book her one-way flight to meet Avery. All that was left was calling Avery. Jane's hands were shaking again as she dialed her daughter's number, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Jane spent Monday morning at Margaret's office, signing paper after paper with trembling hands. Divorce petition, financial disclosure forms, temporary restraining order, just in case. Each signature felt like another lock clicking open on her prison door. Remember, Margaret said, sliding the final document across her desk, we'll have everything filed this week. The process server will deliver the papers on the day you leave in 3 weeks. Make sure you're not there when it happens. Jane nodded, checking her watch. In 3 weeks, Carter would receive the papers that would end their 24-year marriage. By then, she and Avery would be on a plane to their new life. Her phone buzzed. Carter. Jane stared at the screen, her heart hammering. He never called her during the day unless he needed something or unless he was suspicious. She let it go to voicemail. Mrs. Rowan? Margaret was watching her with concern. Everything okay? He's calling. Jane's voice came out as barely a whisper. He never calls unless... The phone buzzed again. Another call from Carter. Then again. Jane, breathe. Margaret leaned forward. You're almost free. Don't let him pull you back in now. But Jane could barely hear her over the pounding of her own pulse. What if he knew? What if he'd somehow figured out what she was doing? Carter might be lazy and self-absorbed, but he wasn't stupid. He knew her routines, her habits. He knew she never called in sick. Her phone buzzed with a text, "Where are you?" Then another, "Call me now." Jane's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the phone. "I have to go. I have to get home before. No." Margaret's voice was firm. "That's exactly what he wants. You go home now before those papers are served, and you might never get another chance to leave." The phone rang again. This time it was Avery calling. "Mom?" Avery's voice was tight with worry. "Dad just called me. He said you called in sick today, but you're not answering your phone. He wanted to know if you were with me." Jane closed her eyes. Of course he'd called the office. Of course he'd check up on her story. In 24 years of marriage, she'd probably called in sick less than 5 times and never without telling him first. "What did you tell him?" Jane asked. "I didn't answer. He left a voicemail asking if you were with me. Mom, he sounded angry, suspicious." Margaret was already writing something on a notepad and sliding it toward Jane. "Stick to the plan. You're helping Avery with apartment paperwork." "Listen to me carefully," Jane said, her voice steadier than she felt. "If he calls back, tell him I'm helping you with documents for your new apartment. Tell him you don't understand all the legal language and you needed me to explain it. Can you do that?" "Mom, what's going on? Can you do that?" Jane repeated. Yes, I can do that." Jane hung up and immediately powered off her phone. She couldn't risk another call. Couldn't risk her resolve cracking if she heard his voice demanding answers she wasn't ready to give. But at home, Carter was pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. Jane's absence had disrupted his routine, and disruption made him paranoid. He tried calling her office at 10 a.m. just to check when she might be feeling well enough to pick up groceries. The receptionist had been apologetic but clear. Jane had called in sick and wouldn't be in today. Sick. Jane, who came to work with the flu rather than miss a commission. Jane, who had worked through food poisoning and a sprained ankle. Jane, who prioritized her job above everything because someone had to keep the money coming in while he found his calling. By noon, his suspicion had curdled into something darker. She was lying. She had to be. But why? He thought about the way she'd been acting lately, quieter than usual, more distant. The way she'd been taking phone calls in the other room. The way she'd started doing laundry at odd hours, like she was trying to avoid him. Was she seeing someone? The thought hit him like a physical blow. His wife, his mousy, anxious wife who apologized for everything, cheating on him? It seemed impossible. But then again, she'd been working late more often. All those client meetings and property showings. How hard would it be to lie about those? He called her phone again, straight to voicemail. That's when he called Avery. "Dad?" Avery's voice was cautious when she finally answered. "What's wrong? Where's your mother?" "What do you mean?" Avery asked. "She called in sick today, but she's not answering her phone. Is she with you?" There was a pause that lasted a beat too long. "Dad, Don't lie to me, Avery. Is she with you or not?" "She's helping me with some paperwork for my new apartment, legal documents I don't understand. She's been explaining them to me all morning." Carter felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. That sounded like Jane. Always helping, always explaining, always managing everyone else's problems. What kind of paperwork? Lease agreements, tenant rights stuff, security deposit forms. It's all really confusing, and Mom knows about real estate law. That made sense. Jane was always lecturing him about contracts and legal terminology when he bothered to listen. Why isn't she answering her phone? We've been really focused. You know how Mom gets when she's trying to explain something complicated. She probably didn't even hear it ring. Carter grunted. That also sounded like his wife. When Jane was concentrating on something, the house could burn down around her and she wouldn't notice. Well, tell her to call me when she's done playing teacher. Dad, wait. Avery's voice had changed, become lighter. Since I've got you on the phone, could you do me a favor? I left some of my old textbooks in my closet. Could you grab them for me when you get a chance? Yeah, whatever. He was already losing interest. Just tell your mother to call me. Will do. Actually, before you go, do you need anything from the store? Mom mentioned she might stop on her way home. Carter perked up. Beer. We're out of beer. I'll tell her. After he hung up, Carter felt better. His wife wasn't cheating on him with some smooth-talking real estate client. She was just being Jane, helpful, responsible Jane who took care of everyone's problems because that's what she did. She'd come home with groceries and beer, probably apologizing for being gone all day, and everything would go back to normal. He settled into his recliner with a satisfied grunt. Crisis averted. At Margaret's office, Jane powered her phone back on to find 3 missed calls from Carter and 1 text from Avery. Handled. He believes the apartment story. Even asked you to pick up beer on your way home. Jane almost laughed. Even in the middle of her escape, Carter was focused on his beer. Some things never changed. But her hands were still shaking as she signed the last document. Jane nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the next few hours might be the longest of her life. For 3 weeks, Jane lived a double life. During the day, she went to work and smiled at clients, sold houses and processed paperwork, acting like nothing had changed, but every evening she planned her escape with the precision of a military operation. She opened a new bank account at a different branch, slowly transferring small amounts that Carter wouldn't notice. She changed her phone number and gave the new one only to Avery and Margaret. She deleted her Facebook, Instagram, every trace of herself from social media. If Carter wanted to find her, he'd have to work for it. During one of their carefully scheduled calls, always when Carter was out buying beer or passed out in his chair, Jane asked casually, "What day are you flying out again?" "Tuesday morning, 8 a.m., flight 447 to Austin." Jane memorized the details but kept her voice neutral. "I'll try to come say goodbye at the airport if I can get away from work." "You don't have to do that, Mom. I know how hard it is for you to take time off." If only you knew, Jane thought. We'll see. The hardest part was the luggage. She couldn't pack openly. Carter would notice suitcases sitting around. Instead, she packed slowly, methodically. A few pieces of clothing hidden in her car trunk each day. Important documents tucked into her purse. Photo albums smuggled out in grocery bags. She kept only 1 suitcase in the house, hidden in the back of their bedroom closet behind old Christmas decorations Carter never touched. Each night, she added something small. A piece of jewelry, a favorite blouse, the business cards from her real estate contacts. The night before Avery's flight, Jane made sure Carter had plenty to drink. "I picked up that beer you like," she said, setting a 212-pack on the kitchen counter. "The good stuff." Carter's eyes lit up. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion. Just thought you deserved something nice," Jane said. By 10 p.m., he was sprawled in his recliner, empty bottles scattered around him like fallen soldiers. His snoring echoed through the house, deep, drunken snoring that meant he wouldn't wake up until noon at the earliest. Jane waited another hour to be safe, then crept to their bedroom. She pulled the hidden suitcase from the closet and made her final selection, the few things that truly mattered. Her grandmother's ring, the photo of her and Avery at high school graduation, the purple diary from all those years ago, evidence of a life she was finally ready to leave behind. She carried the suitcase to her car with the silence of a practiced thief. 1 bag, 24 years of marriage, and everything that mattered fit in 1 bag. At 5 a.m., she showered and dressed for work like any other day. She even made coffee, the domestic routine so automatic she could do it in her sleep. Carter was still unconscious in his chair, drooling slightly onto his shirt. Jane stood in the doorway of the living room for a long moment, looking at the man she'd spent half her life with. He looked smaller somehow, pathetic in his drunken stupor. For just a moment, she felt something that might have been pity. Then she remembered the broken windows, the destroyed televisions, the 24 years of walking on eggshells. The pity faded. She left her house key on the kitchen counter, next to the coffee maker. By the time Carter woke up, she'd be halfway to Texas. The drive to the airport felt surreal. Jane kept checking her rearview mirror, half expecting to see Carter's truck barreling after her, but the road behind her stayed empty. He was probably still snoring, completely unaware that his world was about to collapse. At the airport, Jane checked bag and got her boarding pass with hands that had finally stopped shaking. She'd already bought the ticket online weeks ago. Same flight as Avery, just a few rows behind. She positioned herself where she could see the gate, but where Avery wouldn't easily spot her. When her daughter arrived, rushing with her luggage and looking stressed about making her flight, Jane's heart swelled with love and anticipation. Flight 447 to Austin was called for boarding. Jane waited until Avery was in line, then quietly joined the queue several people behind her. It wasn't until they were both settled in their seats that Avery turned around to adjust something in the overhead bin and froze. "Mom?" Her voice was barely a whisper. Why are you? The confusion on her daughter's face shifted to understanding as she saw Jane's carry-on bag, her boarding pass, the determined look in her eyes. "I'm coming with you," Jane said simply. Avery's face crumpled and she burst into tears of shock, relief, and pure joy. She scrambled out of her seat and threw her arms around her mother right there in the airplane aisle. "I thought you were too scared," Avery sobbed. "I thought you'd never leave him." "So did I," Jane whispered back. "But you were right. I don't want you to copy me. I want you to be proud of me." As their flight taxied down the runway, Jane looked out the window at California disappearing below them. Somewhere down there, Carter was probably just waking up to an empty house and a process server who would change his life forever. For the first time in 24 years, that wasn't her problem anymore. Carter woke to the sound of knocking. Persistent, official knocking that cut through his hangover like a knife. He groaned and checked his phone. 2:47 p.m. Christ, he'd really tied one on last night. His mouth tasted like an ashtray, and his head felt like it was splitting in two. Jane would be at work, probably dealing with some demanding client. The knocking continued. I'm coming, he muttered, shuffling to the front door in yesterday's clothes. Through the peephole, he saw a man in a cheap suit holding an envelope. Carter opened the door. "Yeah? Carter Rowan? That's me. You've been served." The man thrust the envelope at him and walked away before Carter could respond. Carter stared at the envelope in his hands. His name was typed on the front in official-looking letters. Inside, he could see the edges of what looked like legal documents. He wandered into the kitchen, envelope still in hand. The coffee maker was full. Jane must have made coffee before work, like always. But there was something on the counter that didn't belong. A key. Their house key. Why would Jane leave her key on the counter? A cold feeling started in Carter's stomach and spread outward. He tore open the envelope with shaking fingers. The words swam before his eyes. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Irreconcilable differences. Respondent has 30 days to respond or default judgment will be entered. Carter read it once, then twice, the words not quite making sense. Divorce papers. Jane was divorcing him. His wife, his quiet, submissive wife who apologized for everything, was divorcing him. "Jane!" he bellowed, his voice echoing through the empty house. He ran upstairs to their bedroom. The papers crumpled in his fist. Her side of the closet was nearly empty. Her jewelry box was gone. The photo of them on their wedding day, gone from her nightstand. Carter's legs gave out, and he sat heavily on the bed. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. But as he looked around their bedroom with new eyes, he saw the truth everywhere. Gaps where her things used to be. Empty drawers. The space where her perfume bottles had sat for 20 years. She was gone. Really gone. The rage hit him like a freight train. Carter stormed downstairs and grabbed the last beer from the refrigerator, one of the bottles from the 12-pack Jane had bought him last night. The irony was lost on him as he hurled it at the wall with all his strength. Glass exploded across the kitchen floor, beer foam spraying everywhere. The satisfying crash did nothing to ease his fury. "You ungrateful bitch!" he screamed at the empty house. "After everything I've done for you!" He grabbed his phone and called Jane's number. It went straight to a recording. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." She'd changed her number. deleted herself from his life like he was some kind of stalker. His hands shaking with rage, he called Avery. It rang once, then went straight to voicemail. "You've reached Avery. Leave a message." "Avery, call me back right now. Your mother has lost her mind, and I know you put her up to this. Call me back." He hung up and immediately called again, straight to voicemail again. "Don't ignore me, Avery. I'm your father. Call me back, or I'm driving to your apartment right now." But even as he made the threat, Carter realized he had a problem. He was broke, completely broke. The truck in the driveway was running on fumes, and he had maybe $20 in his wallet. Maybe Jane was at work. Maybe this was all some kind of mistake, some misunderstanding they could work out. Carter called Pacific Coast Realty, Jane's office. "Pacific Coast Realty, this is Linda." "Linda, it's Carter. Is Jane there?" There was a pause. "Carter, Jane doesn't work here anymore." "What do you mean she doesn't work here anymore? She quit. Yesterday was her last day." Carter's mouth went dry. "What? Why? Where did she go?" "I'm sorry, Carter, but I honestly don't have any idea. I'm her husband. I'm sure you know." "I understand, but I can't help you with that. I'm sorry." The line went dead. For the first time since finding the divorce papers, Carter felt something other than rage. He felt fear. Jane paid all the bills. The mortgage, the utilities, the groceries, everything came out of her real estate commissions. He hadn't contributed a dime to their household in months. Carter looked around the house with new eyes. Without Jane, he couldn't afford any of it. The mortgage alone was $1,800 a month. The electric bill, the water, the internet, it all added up to more money than he'd seen in years. He was going to lose everything. Panic rising in his throat, Carter scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he'd deleted and re-added a dozen times over the years. His brother David. They hadn't spoken in 3 years, not since Carter had called him drunk and desperate, begging for money that David had refused to lend. David had told him to get his life together, and Carter had told him to go to hell. But David was family. Family had to help, right? The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. David's voice was professional, distant. "You've reached David Rowan. Leave a message." "David, it's Carter. Look, I know we haven't talked in a while, but I'm in trouble here. Jane left me. She filed for divorce, and I need help. I need a place to stay, just temporarily, while I figure things out. Call me back." He hung up and stared at his phone, willing it to ring. 20 minutes later, it did. "Carter." David's voice was flat, emotionless. "David, thank God. Listen, I got your message." "Good, so you understand the situation. Jane's lost her mind and—" "Stop!" David's voice cut through Carter's rambling like a blade. "Just stop." Carter paused, confused by his brother's tone. "Jane should have left you years ago," David continued. "Hell, she should have left you when she took Avery away for those 2 months. Remember that, when you hit her?" "That was one time and I barely—" "You hit your wife, Carter, in front of your daughter, and somehow she came back to you. I never understood why." Carter felt his anger rising again. "You don't understand what I've been going through. The job market, the stress." "We tried to help you," David said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "Mom and Dad tried for years before they died. I tried. We sent you money, got you job interviews, paid for that rehab program you never finished. How many times, Carter? How many times did we bail you out?" "This is different." "No, it's not. It's exactly the same. You created this mess, and now you want someone else to clean it up. Well, I'm done. I live in Vancouver now, by the way. Have for 2 years. Not that you ever bothered to ask." Carter's desperation bled into his voice. "David, please. I'm your brother. You were my brother. But I got tired of helping someone who doesn't want to help himself. You chose this life, Carter. You chose the drinking, the anger, the self-pity. You chose to drive away everyone who ever cared about you. I can change. You've been saying that for 20 years. Jane finally figured out what the rest of us learned a long time ago. You don't want to change. You just want someone to enable you." The line went quiet for a moment. "I hope you figure it out, Carter. I really do. But I'm not going to watch you destroy yourself anymore." David hung up. Carter slumped back into his recliner, the divorce papers scattered around him like fallen leaves. For 24 years, Jane had been his safety net, catching him every time he fell. She'd paid his bills, cleaned his messes, absorbed his anger. Now, for the first time in his adult life, Carter Rowan was completely alone. and he was terrified. Austin, Texas. Jane stood at the window of her new office, watching the morning sun paint the downtown skyline gold. The nameplate on her desk read Jane Desmond. She'd gone back to her maiden name as soon as the divorce was finalized. Behind her, photos lined the wall. Avery at her company's annual awards dinner, Jane at her real estate license renewal ceremony, the two of them at a Longhorns game, laughing like they hadn't in years. "Mom?" Avery poked her head through the office door. "Ready for lunch?" Jane smiled, still marveling at how easy it was now. No calculating Carter's mood, no bracing for an explosion, just a simple lunch with her daughter. "Just let me finish this contract," Jane said, turning back to her desk. She was one of the top agents at Hill Country Realty now, her confidence rebuilt along with her life. The scared, shaking woman who'd left California was gone, replaced by someone who spoke up in meetings, negotiated fiercely for her clients, and went to sleep every night without fear. Avery had flourished too. Her department at the call center was exceeding all targets, and she'd been promoted twice. More importantly, she was dating someone, a kind engineer named Paul, who made her laugh and never raised his voice. "You know what I realized yesterday?" Avery said as they walked to their favorite cafe. "I can't remember the last time I flinched when someone raised their voice." Jane squeezed her daughter's hand. "That's what healing looks like." Meanwhile, in Modesto, California. 300 miles north, Carter Rowan woke at 5:30 a.m. in the back storage room of Hanson's Hardware. The space was barely bigger than a closet, with just enough room for a cot, a small table, and his few remaining possessions. But it was clean, and it was his. He'd lost everything else. The house had been foreclosed on 8 months ago. For a while, he'd lived in his truck, parking in Walmart lots and gas stations, watching his savings dwindle to nothing. The drinking had gotten worse after Jane left. A bottle a day became 2 bottles, then whatever he could afford until he couldn't afford anything at all. Rock bottom had come on a Tuesday morning when he'd woken up in his truck outside a liquor store with no memory of how he'd gotten there. His hands were shaking so badly he couldn't turn the key. He'd sat there for an hour, staring at his reflection in the rearview mirror. He looked like a stranger. Gray, hollow-eyed, defeated. This wasn't who he'd planned to become. For the first time in his adult life, Carter Rowan had admitted the truth. This was his fault. All of it. Jane hadn't been the problem. He had been. His drinking, his anger, his refusal to take responsibility for anything. He'd destroyed his own life and blamed everyone else for the wreckage. That realization had saved him, but barely. He'd used his last dollars for gas and driven until he reached Modesto, where desperation had finally overcome pride. He'd walked into Hanson's Hardware and begged for work. Any work. Bill Hanson, the owner, had taken one look at Carter's hollow eyes and steady hands and offered him a chance. Minimum wage stocking shelves, and he could sleep in the back storage room until he saved enough for an apartment. 1 month, Bill had said. Keep the space clean, show up on time, and don't drink on my property. That's the deal. It had been 11 months now. Carter pulled on his work shirt, clean, pressed, a point of pride now, and stepped outside to use the restroom. The morning air was cool and sharp, and for a moment he allowed himself to feel something he hadn't experienced in years, a small sense of accomplishment. He was sober. He had a job. He was slowly, painfully putting his life back together. But he was still alone. He'd tried calling David once, 6 months ago, just to tell him he was sober and working. The call had gone to voicemail, and David hadn't called back. Carter couldn't blame him. He'd thought about Jane and Avery every single day for a year, but he'd never tried to contact them. What would he say? That he was sorry? That he'd finally figured out what they'd been trying to tell him for decades? The damage was done. Some things couldn't be fixed with apologies. At 6 a.m. sharp, Carter unlocked the front door of Hanson's Hardware and began his day. He stocked shelves, helped customers find the right screws and paint colors, swept floors. Simple work, honest work. Bill appeared around noon, coffee in hand. "How you holding up, Carter?" "Good day so far," Carter replied, organizing a display of garden tools. "Mrs. Patterson came in for that special order doorknob. Made her whole week." Bill nodded approvingly. Carter had discovered he was good with customers, patient, knowledgeable, willing to listen, skills he'd never bothered to develop in his marriage. "Listen," Bill said. I've been thinking. You've been solid for almost a year now. There's a studio apartment above the diner next door. Owner owes me a favor. If you want it, it's yours. $350 a month. Carter's hands stilled on the rake he was holding, his own apartment. A real address again. I'd like that very much, he said quietly. That evening, Carter sat on the loading dock behind the store, eating a sandwich and watching the sunset. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to a contact he'd never deleted but had never called. Avery. His finger hovered over her name for a long time. No, not yet. Maybe not ever. They were better off without him, and he knew it. But someday, maybe in another year, maybe in 5, he might be worthy of forgiveness. Not for their sake, but because he was finally becoming the man he should have been all along. Carter put his phone away and finished his sandwich in the growing darkness, content for the first time in his life to be alone with himself.
If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and drop a comment below. Don't forget to follow for more content just like this. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.